Welcome to Find It. So glad you're here tonight. I have a very special guest. Her name is Kate Troyer, and she is all into Feng Shui. Feng Shui, fun to say. That's how I was telling myself how to say it. She is going to be on to talk to us about her life's journey and Feng Shui. If you don't know what that is, hang tight because right after this intro, she's going to come and tell us what the heck that is. Bring her intro in, Lynn. Hello, Feng Shui Kate. What's going on?
Hi, Debbie. I'm so excited to talk to you.
I'm excited to talk to you too. I love it that you're dubbed, also known as Feng Shui Kate. So let's just dive right in and let's give us a definition of what Feng Shui actually is.
So the easiest way to explain it, because I feel like so many people, they hear the word feng shui and it's like their earmuffs go on because we have no words in our English language that say like, oh, I might know what that is. So the simplest way to put it is that it's the basic principle and idea that your external environment, which is usually your home or your office, the space that you spend most time in, is a direct mirror of anything that's going on inside of you. So it could be what's currently going on inside. It could be past traumas. It could be shit that you've never dealt with in your life. You know, all of that will show up within your space. So when I'm working with clients, that is what we're working through. And the idea is that through addressing the issues that you're seeing in your space, we are then able to dive deeper and address those issues within ourselves. And it kind of, to me, it's so much more powerful to couple those things together because it's like, let's say that I have a clutter in a certain area of my home. And now I understand that the reason I clutter this area is because I have this past trauma that I'm basically piling other stuff in front of because I don't want to deal with it. One, I no longer feel guilty for this clutter because we often feel guilty when the spaces that we have are not perfect or they're messy. Now I say, oh, I don't have to feel guilty. I understand why this is there. And then when we start to clear those spaces, it kind of signifies to the brain, hey, like you're allowed to clear this out. And so while you're clearing it out in your space, you're also able to clear it out of your mind. And that's to me what just makes it so wonderful and powerful.
Okay, that is really cool because I'm like, I want to like I'm like da 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 da. But let's go back to this again. So Feng Shui, and it's so funny because after I was trying to make sure I was pronouncing it right, I actually sent Kate a message today, and I'm like, is it Feng Shui or is it Feng Shui? Is Shui whatever? And she was like, yeah, in Eastern, the Eastern world, they say Shui, but we say in Western world we're Feng Shui. Yeah. But and I kept saying fun to say Feng Shui. It gave me a little a way to remember it. But the actual words themselves together, Feng Shui, could you explain to us?
Yeah.
Could you explain to us what is its heritage? Where did it come from? And what does that word actually mean?
So the words feng shui literally mean wind and water. So again, we're translating this. I like to use the analogy of a sailboat. And let's imagine that we are the sailboat and the wind is what's carrying us through the water. The wind, feng, is the unseen world, our inner emotions. And the word shui, the water that we are traveling in, is the seen world, which would be our environment. So that's really what those two words mean. This is a practice that originated in China thousands and thousands of years ago. And while it's really hard, there are many different forms of feng shui as well. And because over here in the West, we didn't necessarily build our buildings or our homes with the idea of feng shui, or even energy for that matter, in mind. So I actually practice and was taught form school feng shui, which is basically a more intuitive approach. It's a little less rigid than like a compass school might be, or some of the other like classical feng shui methods.
Joe Ingram, you know he's going to dive in there with
I know.
one-liners. He says he doesn't live on a sailboat, so that analogy doesn't work for him.
It doesn't vibe with him.
It works with me. I love that. I love it. I didn't realize that the words meant air and water. That's really cool. So the way you learned was a little less rigid, but maybe it's easier for us in the Western world, right, to adopt it on
Yes.
like a lesser scale, so we can like learn and grow with it a little bit more. So give me an idea of, with this feng shui, okay, and that art of living in your space and bringing it to life to make you feel good, right? So explain that. Like, how do you go into a home and work with someone with their space with feng shui in mind?
So it really somewhat depends on the client, right? Part of my kind of specialty, or at least like the clients I kind of like to attract, are a lot of times ones that have some deeper, heavy past traumas.
Mhm.
And there's a reason for that. It's something that I can relate to. And it's actually what made me realize I started intuitively, unknowingly practicing from the time I was about 7. Um, and so that type of working together looks a little bit different than someone that maybe just wants to enhance the energy in their space, right?
Yeah.
But through each of those, whether it's deeper stuff we're working on or whether it is a little bit simpler, right? There's 3 things that I'm always looking to do with a client. And one is creating an awareness within their space. 2 is connecting them with the space that they lived in, kind of like, and that's connecting them with the space that they live in, as well as kind of connecting them with their inner self or their body, and then creating a plan of alignment. So that way, because if you think about vibration, if you're vibrating up here and your home's vibrating down here, eventually you're going to come back down to meet it. So we have to create a plan of alignment to bring your home to the vibration that you want to live it, or your dream life lives at, so that then you can kind of match those energies, and it makes this really, really powerful combination. So someone who has some past traumas to work through, usually I'm going to work with them for at least 8 weeks, sometimes longer. And that'll look like doing a home consultation in person first. And just to get a sense and feel of the space. I tried doing it virtually, and while it worked, to me, it just wasn't as powerful as me being in the space. And then we'll work together virtually for at least 8 weeks to kind of go deeper, uncover things, and then create alignment solutions for them. Someone who just wants some enhancements, same type of thing. We're going to go through the space together. It'll be a much longer one-time appointment. And we'll look through things like, what are you trying to do in your life right now? Maybe it's you're trying to learn a new skill, or you're trying to bring in a new partner. Maybe you're starting a business and you want to bring in new clientele. I mean, you want to bring in more wealth and prosperity into your life. I mean, it's literally endless. And with every client, I'm using a tool called the Feng Shui Bagua map, but you will have to, I've started reading that.
I know.
But you'll hear me refer to it as the home energy map. And it's the same thing. It's basically an energy map that I will place on your home, right? And if you're curious about what this is, you can actually download a guide on my website. and play around with it yourself if you're curious. But this is something that I'll use with clients. And it's basically like, if you're familiar with the chakras in your body, it's basically like the chakras of your home. And each one relates to a different aspect and area of your life. So if we want to focus on more abundance, we're probably going to hang out in that area in your home and make enhancements there, so on and so forth.
Yeah. And, I believe in, and, everything has energy. So when you talk about you go into the home, and if your home is vibrating at a lower vibration and you're high vibing, and then you end up meeting it, that to me makes so much sense. And I know a lot of people may be watching, or that will watch, may say, what the heck are they talking about? Well, you know what? I believe it's true for me. And I've always been really interested in having my space feel good, look good. And it always cheers me up if I like getting rid of stuff too. Like, I can't wait to like get rid of stuff. And when I release that stuff, I feel lighter and better. And so everything you're talking about makes so much sense to me. I didn't realize it was that in depth though, with like, even thinking about, like, if you like yoga and you understand about the chakras in the body, like also addressing that and translating that to your home, having those same energy sources and chakras. That's really cool to me, Kate. So give me an example of like, a client you'd go into, and you told me, several weeks or whatever, and you don't have to give names or anything. We don't care about that. But can you give us a situation where you had gone in and maybe somebody had trauma, and they were like childhood trauma, right? And you can tell by the way their home is maybe decorated, or the way they store things. Can you tell that by what you're looking at in their home?
Yeah, most times, yes.
Yeah.
It's so using that home energy map, that Bagua map, is really what helps me to kind of see where things are at. So, for example, there's an area on the map that I refer to as the inner child. And if that area is cluttered, messy, ignored, just kind of like looks sad, maybe there's a piece of artwork that just feels really bad, right? I'm looking for things that don't feel good,
Okay.
right? And instead of being like, this feels bad and that feels bad, my question is always like, tell me more about this. Tell
Okay.
me more about this, right? Because I often will have people that are like, my number one thing is like, please do not clean up for me. Like, I want to see your space the way that you normally live in it, because if I can't see it like that, it's not going to be as effective, So,
That makes sense.
yeah. So, for example, a client that might have that trauma, there's also an area for healing and new beginnings, and that area coupled with their inner child, maybe even coupled with their love and relationship area.
Yeah.
It's like you kind of see these things. And a lot of this for me is very intuitive. So
Mm.
it's not, not everyone's the same.
Mhm.
But there's just sometimes certain things that I'll see and I'll be like, oh, this feels really bad. Tell me more about this. Where did
Mm.
this come from? Um, One thing that I can say that I see often, right? So and this has not necessarily anything to do with that energy map, but let's say our master bedroom. And I see this with couples all the time, like very often. I go into the master bedroom, there's one nightstand. And I'm like, oh, whose side of the bed is this? And it's so funny because whoever they say, wife, husband, like whichever significant other, whichever partner, it's always the more dominant one in the relationship, because you
Interesting.
are unconsciously giving them more, like, their space is more important. They have a place to put their water. They have the lamp. They have a place to put their book, like anything like that. And it's so crazy to see. And then I'm like, oh, well, in Feng Shui, we really love balance, right?
Yeah.
Balance is so important. Balance is, of course, you are, Joe. We're going to ask your wife about that
Oh
one.
gosh.
um, we're gonna look at them and instead of being like, oh, your significant other's so dominant, like I'm not there to judge or accuse or anything like
Right.
that,
Totally.
right? But I'm there to just point some things out and they go, oh, wow, I never thought about that. Yeah, I'd really love to see some balance here. Same nightstand, same lamps. I was actually, I teach it at different retreats, and I'm actually teaching at some girls' camps in Florida next week. Like, I love teaching. That's actually one of the things I love most about what I do. But I was teaching at a retreat, I think back in October, and I had this woman in one of my classes, and we're talking about the bedroom. And I start talking about the nightstands, and she's like, okay. And I'm like, so ideally we want equal space on both sides of the bed. We don't want one person, shimmying into the bed and the other person can basically dance there, right? Exactly. And so we want equal space. We want two nightstands. We want two matching lamps. Like, we want that equality in our relationship. And that's if you already have a significant other or if you're single, right? Because you may be looking for a relationship, right?
Mhm.
Unless you're not looking for a relationship, then I've heard people be like, oh, I'm getting rid of my other
I
nightstand,
just
right?
want
Like,
one.
just want one, which is totally fine. But anyway, so there's this woman in my class, and she's like, and I say the two lamps, and she's like, oh my God, I just realized that. She's like, I have the same two nightstands, but my lamps are really different. And I was like, oh, and I said, well, are you in a relationship? She's like, well, I'm not currently. I just got out of a pretty long-term relationship. And she goes, do you want to see a picture of the lamps? And I said, yes. And so she shows me the one is very dainty and feminine. The other one was really kind of like industrial, masculine. Like, they didn't even they didn't even like go together. Maybe they weren't a pair, but they did not play together at all, right?
Yeah.
And so I point that out to her and I said, well, did you guys break up because it was like you were just so different? And it's like all of your conversations always came back to like this, but we're so different. But we're so different. Or your arguments were just like, it's like you couldn't see eye to eye. And she's like, yeah, that was literally our entire relationship. And she was like mind blown. Well, I saw her a few months later, and she came up to me. We were at an event. She came up and she's like, I just want you to know that you changed my life with the lamps. And I was like, tell me more. And she's like, well, I bought these lamps. And I told her, when you're buying these things for your bedroom, don't just like, because she wanted to bring someone new into her life. And I
Yeah.
was like, so don't just think about how much you love it. Like, yes, you need to love it, but like, how are you inviting that
Mhm.
equal, partner, like the ultimate person that you want to attract,
It's
right?
interesting to me too, like, I'm still thinking about having is it, like, almost like the energy of our subconscious? And when she did the lamps, it's almost like subconsciously she knew that that's
Exactly.
how this relationship was, and, it all kinda it's intertwined,
It
right?
just, yeah, everything's intertwined. So it's kind of like, is it the chicken or the egg comes first, right? It's all constantly working together, right? So it's and the intention that you put towards something is so important,
Yeah.
right? We do a lot of things unintentional, and that's really where that energy from within us is just pouring out into our space unknowingly. That happens when we're walking down the street and we're rude to someone because we're in a shitty mood and we don't think about it, right? But
Yeah.
if we're intentional about addressing someone, we're putting that good energy out and we're getting good energy back. So it's basically the same concept, right? And that's why, for me, I love that I didn't find the very strict form of feng shui first because I
Uh-huh.
feel like I would have hated it. I owned a really successful home staging business and a design business before
Wow.
I found feng shui. So I've kind of been able to take that, and interior styling is just one of, I would say, just one of my natural composition is one of my natural gifts. And so I've kind of been able to couple that with the things that I've been through in my life, right? Those personal experiences, and then my knowledge and passion for feng shui, and it just makes this really awesome sauce, basically, that I get to share with
Awesome
my
sauce.
clients.
I'm digging it, Kate. I'm loving this. I went right in there with the feng shui, but let's roll back the years a little
Mhm.
bit, and then we're going to come back to feng shui. So don't leave, because I have some really good questions about feng shui and how we can use them ourselves with like the
Yeah,
like
I love that.
feng shui for dummies kind of thing. So let's roll back the years, okay? And I know in your bio it says that you had some unstable, you had an unstable upbringing. So let's
Mhm.
roll back to that age where you started just innately and intuitively applying feng shui to your life, that you didn't realize that you had a name to it, but that's
Mhm.
basically what you were doing. Back then, could you give us like, where were you raised and what was this upbringing that you have spoke about?
Yeah, so I was raised outside of Worcester, Ohio, right, in a really, really small town. And when I say an unstable upbringing, I think probably growing up, looking from the outside at our family, it wasn't like, oh, wow, we feel bad for them. It wasn't anything like that. Dad, if you're watching this, I absolutely love you and you did an amazing job. But my mom was extremely narcissistic,
Okay.
and she took a lot of that energy out on me, and it became a very she it was like almost like a jealousy type of thing, this really odd type of energy. And I really didn't realize what was going on until I was much older, right? I thought I literally didn't see things until I was older. And then I was like, holy shit, that was really fucked up,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um,
And
but
you wouldn't have been able to process that as a young kid. You wouldn't have
right.
understood what, and it would still be even difficult as an adult to have a parent that was using that narcissistic energy on her own daughter, right?
Yes, and I'm being very kind with my description of it. I just feel like I want to keep this about feng shui and how it's like I want to keep this really positive. I don't like to dwell in that negativity.
I get it.
But there was definitely a lot of like we did not have a normal family unit, right?
Okay.
And and I could sense that like things were not normal. Another thing, like my mom was she was not clean, she was not cleanly necessarily, very messy. And now that kind of makes sense to me because that's probably what was going on inside her, right?
Right.
And she like championed that, like, oh, if you don't like my disgusting house, then don't come over and be my friend. And I would be like, ew, like
Yeah.
it made me very neurotic as a kid. But really, what started me getting into like changing my space was from the time I was about 7, maybe 8. I found Martha Stewart living, and I was obsessed with her. Like in the summer, that's what I watched every morning. Like like maybe I would watch cartoons, but I was like, I have to watch Martha Stewart, 10 a.m. That's when she was on. It was like Regis and Kathy at 9, right? I would watch that as like a 7-year-old, Regis and Kathy at 9, and then Martha Stewart at 10, like every single day. And I was fascinated by her, like in her ability to take anything and make it amazing, right? Like it didn't matter if she was Joe. It didn't matter if she was like literally she could be making s'mores and the woman would go out and forage for the perfect sticks in the woods and teach you how to whittle them. And I just loved all the intentionality that went behind everything she did, and everything she did was creating an experience. And I thought, God, I want my world to be like that because mine was so like chaotic and unsafe and very lackluster. And so from watching that, I would do things like whenever I was a big deep cleaner, and I would rearrange any decor we had, and then it turned into, man, this bathroom looks really gross. I found a gallon of paint in the basement, and like my mom would be gone all day. My dad would maybe be out in his shop, and he would come in and I'd be like, Dad, I painted the bathroom. And bless his heart, my mom hated it. It would make her so mad. But my dad would be like, I remember the first time I painted something without asking. And you'd think like my dad would be like livid, right? And I remember, and this is why he's so awesome. He was like, you know what? I'm so proud of you for taking the initiative and wanting to change this and make it look better. But we really got to teach you how to paint before you do this again, you know? And then he taught me how. And that was kind of like, he worked all the time growing up, like a lot of, you know, kids in the 80s and 90s, like dad was gone, mom was home with you, right?
Right.
And he, I don't believe, saw a lot of the things that were going on. And it was like also doing those things because I wanted to learn how to do them or do them better also got me, you know, personal time with my dad. And so it was kind of like this whole soup of things that led me to kind of be practicing this. But mainly it was like, I realized when I was older, oh my God, like that's why I started doing this stuff. I was trying to change my environment to what I really wanted it to be. So like my bedroom was so important to me. It was always like my little sanctuary. And I think back on times when my room was like a hot mess and it was crazy and it, you know, like those were really bad times in my life. And every time to get out of that period, the first thing I would do would be like cleaning up my space. And even as like a child, I barely have any of my childhood belongings. I didn't save hardly anything because like 2 or 3 times a year, I would literally go through every single thing I owned and get rid of anything I didn't use. Like no one told me to do this. I just would.
Martha told you to. No.
Martha probably told me to do it, right? And that's what I would do. And I'd be like, okay, like I want to give these to kids that don't have anything. And, you know, I don't use it anymore. And so I was like constantly like clearing the energy out of my space and things like that. So it just kind of, you know, it was like, once I was older, I was like, wow, like no one taught me how to do this. I was just doing it.
That's crazy. I read somewhere, it may have been on your website, which is beautiful, by the way.
Thank you.
I was wondering what happened where you got to that moment where you saw Feng Shui in a magazine or something. You were with friends and you were like, this is what I've been doing.
Oh, I'm so
It
excited.
sets you on the trail, right? To education about that. Tell us.
Yes, this is one of my absolute favorite stories because it was totally like synchronicity. Like it was all synchronistic that led me to this. So I had my really successful staging business. I was on a weekend trip with a couple girlfriends and we were like, okay, this isn't going to be normal girls trip. Like we're meditating to Dr. Joe Dispenza at 5 a.m. We're like doing all of these things, right? Like this is like spiritual girls weekend. That's what we're doing. And I had brought this like manual with me that a few years prior, it was like an online like Feng Shui certification. And I didn't plan on getting certified. Like it was literally like I paid probably $50 for it and printed a manual, right? Yeah. But I literally had it like professionally printed and bound and everything with the idea that I would just read it. I had always been aware of Feng Shui and I had a very basic kind of idea about it. And like many people thought like, oh, it just is kind of like the flow of your energy in your home, right? Mm-hmm. And I had printed this out years before, at least 2 years prior, and had never touched it. But for some reason on this trip, I found it at my house randomly, or I had it on a bookshelf or something, and I pulled it out and decided to bring it with me. And it was one morning or even afternoon, like I had a really, really powerful meditation that morning. Mm. And I was just like, I don't know what's going on, but like something like I don't know. I just knew something was going to like hit me. I don't know. So I pull open this manual. We're going to sit out by the pool or something, or we're going to have lunch. And when I open the manual, it's like open to a random page and there's a little sticky note in my handwriting that says, teach this. And I thought, well, I've never even freaking read this. So why would I have on a random, it wasn't on the front, it was like a totally
This
random
is
page.
cracking me up, Kate. This is cracking me up. It's a note to
I
you.
swear to God, it's totally true too. I'm not making this up.
Like back
this
then, you were
legit.
writing notes to yourself, to
I
your
know.
future self, and then you find your future self on this girl's trip, meditation, yada yada. Boom, you find
There
this
it is.
note
And
to
I'm like, this is so interesting. And I'm like, I do not remember writing this, but I thought, okay, so I try to explain it away and I'm like, well, maybe I was thinking about teaching it to like something in it to like a group of realtors or something, like some concept, right? And I'm like, yeah. And then my friend's like, no, like you need like this is big. And I'm like, yeah, I think it's big too. So later on that day, we go to a local metaphysical store. My friend comes up and she's like, they have a whole section on feng shui.
Oh my God.
And I went over and I literally bought every single book that they had on feng shui. Like I could barely fit everything in my suitcase.
Oh, I love it.
And I just bought everything. I'm like, I didn't know what I was looking at or what I was doing. And the first book I opened up, it was like the day we were going home. I'm sitting by the pool a few hours beforehand. I grab one of my books and I start reading it. And it was The Western Guide to Feng Shui by Tara Catherine Collins. And I will never forget that because within the first chapter, I was like, one, oh my God, like I love this woman. Like I just connected with her so strongly. And two, I had that realization of, holy shit, I'm already doing this with my stagings. I'm doing this with my design clients. And oh my God, I've intuitively been doing this since I was like 7 years old and I didn't even know. Like I've been doing it unknowingly my whole life. And I thought, holy cow, if I really deeply understood this, think of how powerful I could be and how much like I could be of service. Like how much could I help people if I like really understood something that I was already naturally doing. So I thought, wow, I really like this woman. I wonder if she like does classes or anything like that. And the book was written in the 90s. And so I thought, it's probably unlikely. I look her up and she just happens to have a whole school called the Western School of Feng Shui.
Hashtag no coincidences. This is amazing. Yes.
So literally I see that they used to have a full-on school that you would go to. Now it's like you do online and then you can do full online or you can choose to do online and then an 8-day full-on immersive thing with another teacher, a couple times a year. Well, this happened to be about 6 months away and it was in Sedona, which over the weekend we were literally talking about visiting. And I was like, and I'd never talked about going to Sedona before in my life ever. And I thought, oh my God, this is it. I emailed her a couple questions. She personally responded to me, emailed me back. And I came home and I told my boyfriend, I'm getting rid of all of my staging because I owned all of my own inventory. I said, I'm getting rid of all of my own inventory. I'm not taking on any new clients for the next 6 months. Like I had like 2 or 3 like design clients at the time I was working with. I'm not taking any new clients on. I'm dedicating the next 6 months to nothing but feng shui. And then I'm going to Sedona in September and I'll be gone for over a week. And he was like, you're doing what? And I'm like, yeah.
You just left on a girls trip and you come back and you're all feng shuied out and you're leaving and yeah, I'm quitting my job for 6 months.
100%. He's like, but you're doing so well. You're staging. And I'm like, yeah, I know, but it's not what I'm supposed to be doing. Like this is it. And he's like, babe, like, I've heard you say that about things before. And I'm like, no, like, this is literally all the things I always thought I should be. Like, it just aligns everything for me. And I am willing to get rid of my really successful business that's paying me a really nice paycheck that I really like and I know I'm really good at. Like, I'm giving it all up right now. I'm done.
Oh,
And
wow.
he
See,
was just
that
like,
is a huge step.
what?
That is a huge step. You know what? It's the slogan for you is feng shui all day, feng shui all day.
Right?
But
And
it
so
is
that's
an
basically
amazing
what I
thing.
did.
Yeah, Julie Preston says, "I love her energy," and I see Joe Ingram and Mark
Thank you.
Rodriguez and Andrew Heston, and early on up there, I saw, I think Cannon was here. Everyone's like, these are the people who are making comments. Thank you guys so much for being here. But you know what's funny? So the first business I started was in fashion and helping women feel wonderful in the clothes that they're wearing. And when I would go
I,
to people's closets, it's kind of like the same thing, different, but it's the way it makes you feel when you're in a nice outfit that you know fits you well, and it's accentuating your shape, and you just feel like $1,000,000, and it just, you walk with a little extra pep in your step. I feel like
mhm.
our home, our ambiance, our environment also, if you like to go to your space and it feels like you can breathe, right? I mean, it all, we're, everything around us is part of us. You know, we're all part of the universe, and we're all part of the energy and everything. And don't you see, Kate, when you would go in, and I have a question about that too, about how you do it now, but when someone's space is cleaned up and put together in a way that they love and it makes them, I bet you can tell a difference. And then you probably get really cool feedback by like, I love to sit right here now and read. I don't always try to leave my house. Like, I know a lot of people will just close their closet and just be like, I can't, or they'll go buy more crap and stuff it in an already overstuffed closet. And it's just more crap that they don't really like, but they're just buying it
Mhm.
just to have something. And
Mhm.
in your house, if you just keep shoving stuff in a corner and hiding it, you know it's there. It's still like in your psyche and bugging you. So how do you and you, I mean, now that you, okay, wait, let's go back. I'm really excited. So you went and you got, you know, you got educated in feng shui, you read everything you could get your hands on, but you go away and you get, and then when you come back, how did you reinvent yourself with your new business with feng shui?
At first, that was a little interesting for me, because it had so much to do with like these energetics that like I had really practiced personally, for a few years prior to that. Yoga for me was the first thing that like got me into this more spiritual, energetic place, dealing with, you know, kind of shit I had stuff down, because that was also something too. When I decided that I was going to start practicing feng shui and learning about it, I also made a commitment to working on my own shit, because
Nice.
I knew that I had a lot deeper things going on that I was not addressed. And I saw that through starting to practice it in my home.
Yes.
And I thought, oh my God, I can see so much. And I knew that if I wasn't dealing with it, I was not going to be able to help people in the way that I really needed, that I really needed to help them.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, not only am I committed to learning something new, but I'm really committed to like digging deep. And it was like things that I had dug deep on before. And I got to a place where it felt really, really bad. And I was like, I'm going to put this back away. I'm done with this. And I made myself go through that. So by the time I was kind of like done with everything, quote unquote, right? I'm always still learning and practicing new
Sure.
things. But by the time I was kind of done with that, I really did have a moment of struggle, because I was like, I am personally very different. Not just my business is different, but I am really different as a person. And I also felt like people that knew me before, I mean, I've always been a little bit of an oddball, right? And into kind of different things, but like this was like very different.
Okay.
And I had that moment of like, wow, because I had people for months. Are you still staging? What's going on? Oh, that's so sad. And I'm like, no, 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 it's amazing. Like I'm doing this, you know? And so I had a moment where I was like, oh, like everything's different now. How do I step into this And what really helped me
Wait a
was,
minute. So
yeah,
when I want to make sure I understand, because I think I understand really well, but when you say everything's different, that's internally everything's different because you still
very
had the
much.
knowledge, the experience, and badass work ethic and all that rest. You could just go do a job. But you're
Right.
saying different in the way of internally, you're like, how do I now move forward with this new stuff I got going on here? Because you released all the old pent up
Exactly.
stuff. So that's what you mean. So then you continue. I'm straight now. I
Yeah,
just
no,
wanted to make
yes,
sure I
that's
understood.
definitely, it's not only that my business morphed into something. And to me, I saw that as more of like, it was just a layering. Like I'm adding another layer of what I already know I'm good at. But like I'm approaching everything I'm doing as this completely different person.
Yes.
And so that was that was an interesting moment for me. And I think what really helped me is one of my really close friends, Elias, hosts and has created these women's retreats in St. Petersburg, Florida. Actually, but she kind of goes between St. Pete and Cleveland. And I think she's going to have one in Ohio sometime this year.
Ooh.
Yeah, they're freaking amazing. And she was like, I want you to teach feng shui at the retreat. And I was like, but I don't know if I can do that, right? And
Oh,
she
you
was like,
can.
yeah, you can fucking do it. Like, of course, like you're teaching at the retreat. And I remember being like, oh my
I
God.
love it.
And I was so nervous about it at first, right? Because I'm like, can I teach this? Like, and she's like, you've been doing it your whole life. Of course you can teach it, and I'm like, okay. And so that for me was like teaching at that retreat and seeing how people reacted to it and seeing all these light bulb moments
Oh,
just from being like, everything is energy. This chair is energy, like just like a dog. Like, you know what I mean? Like all of
yeah.
these things and seeing people being like, oh my God, I
Yeah.
never thought about these curtains in my living room that I've hated for 5 years give me hate energy every time I'm around them.
So
And I'm like,
funny.
yes, yes, they give you that energy. Like, get rid
Shut
of
these
them.
curtains. I'm freaking open these curtains. Yeah, I know. That's
Yeah,
amazing though. But you did teach it and you
I
loved
did.
that feeling. And now after that, you're a teacher too. You're a
Hmm.
great communicator. You love what you do with passion. So that's so fun. So when she comes and does the next one in Ohio, you're going to also teach that.
Yeah, most likely, yes.
Oh, I
I
want
do. I
to.
definitely do her St. Petersburg ones. I think the one in Ohio is going to be in Huron. There's this really cool, gosh, I'm trying to remember what it is called. It's this like really cool, like I don't want to, it's like a place, it's like a farm, but it's not a farm. It's like a culinary place, but like they grow all of their own food. They're up by the
Mm.
lake.
Mhm.
It's really cool. If anybody's interested in like learning more about the retreat, it's just it's Bodhi Retreats, bodhi-retreat.com is where you can get more information and if you want to connect with Elise and talk more. But yeah, I teach there, and that's actually how I actually started. I go to St. Petersburg pretty often. I have clients there. I actually will work with clients really like all over the
That is so
country.
cool too.
Yeah, I
That's
love
not a
it. It's
crappy
so
place to go work.
awesome,
Get some
right?
of those accounts during the snow blowing in Ohio. You'd be. I
Exactly.
wanted to pull this up. So you've done a lot, but this
Oh
top five
yeah.
ways to get the most out of your renovation budget. Can you tell me just like an overview of like what you think from what you could share just as like a little fun thing for our audience?
Oh, wow. So this is a series that I actually do with Cross Country Mortgage, which was I became friends with the kid or the guy that ran their social media account and we were like, we should do something together. And this was over, oh gosh, probably a year and a half ago. And we came up with this like Ask a Designer series. So once a month, we do a Facebook Live where we talk about ways that we like, that one's your reno budget. So that might be, you know, and that's kind of like my designer, you know, stylist background. But now they've let me they let me sneak in feng shui and stuff
That's
now, which is
awesome. Yeah.
really cool. And I love that they're like really interested in it. But like reno budget wise, I think something that we always talk about are like kitchens and bathrooms, right? So how can you, you know, maybe take like an okay layout in your kitchen and, you know, maybe you don't have a full on budget to completely gut your kitchen, but you can paint your cabinets and put up a new backsplash. You know, maybe you don't have money for backsplash. So instead we could try a fun peel and stick wallpaper, you know, just kind of all those different things.
Awesome.
Yeah, so we talk about reno stuff, and it's their renovation team that I do the calls with, right? So we'll kind of go, but we've also done like feng shui in your office, decluttering, like all of that kind of stuff. So it's
And that
really
is amazing too, like the decluttering in itself. Let me ask you this,
huge.
of all the things with feng shui, because there's, you know, it's even, this is what's crazy, Kate. It was probably 4 or 5 months ago up on my Google feed, just a story about, and I don't remember if it said feng shui or not, but I remember it specifically talking about how you should arrange your furniture in your bedroom and your something about you shouldn't have your bed underneath the window, or I don't even remember now, but I was like, I was interested. I mean, I read the article. I was like, well, I'm doing that wrong, but I'm doing this right, according to whatever this was, the principle. But of all the things with feng shui, if you could give our audience one thing besides this nightstands and lamps that really helps improve your space for good energy, what would you tell us to do?
Okay, so my number one tip would be this. You need to start trusting your intuition, because what feels good to you is probably good, and what feels bad to you is bad. So I can come in and I can guide you, and I have knowledge, right? That I can share with people. But when it comes down to it, what feels good to you? And yes, it's not great to have your bed in front of a window, but in my master bedroom, there's no other place for our bed. So guess what? It's in front of a window, right? Yeah. But the idea is that you want a nice headboard then, and you want some nice curtains, because it's a feeling of safety, right? So as long as you're putting some layers between you and that window, right, that kind of is what makes the difference. And so that's why, to me, there are no hard, fast rules in feng shui, and not everything works for everybody, and not everything works for every space. We have to be able to be fluid. And the biggest thing to me is that what feels good to you is probably good, and what feels bad to you is probably bad. And that's why I hate trends and things like that. Like, use your intuition. What feels good to you? I practice this. This is what I do for a living. And I'm, a really good stylist. I move something around 17 times in my house before I put it up and say, this is where it belongs.
Yeah,
you know where something feels good. You know. But we've been taught to, my house has to look like this, and I have to do this. Like, no. Your home should tell a story of you. And my number one thing is that it should be filled with everything that you love. If you don't love it, it needs to go. I don't care who gave it to you. I don't care why you think you need to keep it. Like, obligatory keeping of things is so dumb, and it signals that you have boundary issues in your life.
Wow.
Right? It's so crazy. And I will share.
We could do a whole other episode.
Oh my God, we could just keep going. I will share one thing, because we've talked about decluttering quite a bit. And I think this is really helpful for people, because so many, at least I want to give my definition of what clutter is, because I think that this is helpful, because so many people have the wrong definition of clutter, at least in my eyes, right? So to me, clutter is anything that you don't love, you don't use, or it doesn't serve a purpose. And I'm talking like serve a purpose in the last year, that you haven't used in the last year. if you haven't, you know, there's always those things that we hang on to that we're like, well, what if I need this for a random party, but I haven't used it in 5 years? Like, get rid of it, because by holding on to something like that, you're literally saying, you're symbolizing, it's such a symbolism of lack, because you're like, well, I couldn't possibly go out and buy a new one if I really needed it. Like, you probably could, you
That's
know?
so true. I love this, Kate. And you know, when you're talking about making sure your home feels good to you, the style that you like, and it doesn't have to be a cookie cutter out of the Martha Stewart living, you know, catalog, that it looks like
Right.
this. If it feels good to you. And same thing is like what I tell my clients with clothes. I don't want my style to be your style. What's your style? And let's make sure it fits
Exactly.
you well. You know,
Exactly.
if you love these curtains, I may not like them, but I'm not living here. Let's make sure they fit your window. Boom.
Exactly. Yes.
Well,
I
what?
used to have clients, design clients, that would be like, I'd be like, oh, you know, like, tell me about this. And, or what do you want to keep in this room? Well, I really love this painting. I got it from here, da da da. But I, you know, but my son, my son tells me it's horrible and they hate it, but I love it. And but so I wanted to know what you think. And if you don't like it, I'll get rid of it. And I'm like, I don't live here.
Yeah.
So, like, if you love it, we're gonna make it feel
Work.
amazing in the room,
Yes.
right?
Yes. Oh
And
gosh,
that's what's so
Trisha.
important. And it's
Trisha's
so
like, she's talking to me right now.
Trisha, listen to me. No. But you know, Debbie, it's really interesting. So there are some women that went, not when I was there, but went to the Western School of Feng Shui, like I did. And they literally do like feng shui for like your wardrobe, like they're feng shui like stylists. So they
Wow.
apply it to your wardrobe.
I
And it's
love that.
fascinating.
Well, I
Mhm.
believe in it because I believe in everybody finding their own style and their own personal love of what they put on their body. And I totally vibe with what you're saying about the house too. But you know what? I was kind of giggling because when you were talking about you were an oddball, you're always like you're different or whatever. And I thought, wonder what I would have done if I would have shown up to my best friend's house and she would have said, and now we're going to sit down and watch Martha Stewart. You know what I
At like
mean?
8,
At
at
8
8.
years old, like, I'd
Mhm.
totally dig it now, but at 8, I'd be wanting to play Barbie dolls or something and be like, "Okay, we're gonna watch Martha." But that's
Yeah.
so cute. You're so adorable, and I love your energy, and I love that you, I was gonna say too, and identify with keeping your spaces in a certain way, and whenever I get, like, really upset about something, what I've noticed about myself is I immediately start organizing something.
Mhm.
And I think that in life, when you can't control a situation or that might be hurtful, or it might be something you don't like, and you really have no control over that, you can control your environment with what you have around you. And I don't know if that's why I do it or not, but immediately if I'm upset, I'm like, and now I'm going to do this. I'm going to sort this
Yeah.
and get rid of some clothes I don't wear. It's so funny. But
Yeah, it's
I love
definitely
what
why
you're
you do
doing.
it.
I want to know, outside of Martha Stewart, and okay, you've found it. You've been on this because this show's about finding it. And that means whatever it is in life that all of a sudden you have this aha moment and you're like, this is where I need to be. I have found this. I'm finding it. And the story of you with your girlfriends, and you realize, oh my gosh, this is what I've been doing my whole life.
This
And I
is it.
found that. But during the journey of life, who has been your biggest inspiration, and that you've learned from? Who would you say?
Oh my gosh, that's a really
I know you said
amazing
your dad was
question.
really important to you and he was cool, but I mean, like,
Yeah, I'm really, oh God, like I always, it's so funny. I always attribute this to Martha Stewart. Like I was
well,
literally
maybe it
that,
should.
like as a kid, that she was like who I looked. I remember thinking, God, I wish she was like my mom, right? Like I looked at her like that,
Mhm.
right? Like
I
that
think
was
that's
how
cool.
much influence she had on me. I would say outside of her, my grandmother,
Right.
honestly both of my grandparents, because their home always felt really good to me. It was very safe. I was very safe there. They were very
Mhm.
much like, it was the one space that I felt love, and I was able to like
Mm.
really really be safe.
Mhm.
And they both passed away within a few months of each other. I think it's been about 10 years now.
Mm.
And I just remember talking to my grandma kind of as she was passing. We were all able to be there with her, and she went first and then my grandpa a few months later. And I just knew that like she was supposed to see me do really amazing shit. And so that's what I will think about now is, and I'm going to try not to get emotional.
Mm.
Thank you for asking this question because I haven't thought about it like this. She would just love so much what I'm doing, and she would have taken so much of an interest in it. And really it was like she was probably the closest thing. And really my grandpa too, they love to like bake, like for Christmas, I'm telling you, they would make all of the things and they would give these huge platters to everyone they knew, and holidays and things like that. Like they always went out of their way to make sure that we felt really special and really loved, and like that environment alone. And I do remember like helping her pick out her new sofa and like things like
Mhm.
that. Like she wasn't over the top like I kind of am with things, but she was intentional about her environment, and that was the one space that like I could go to and I didn't feel like I needed to do anything there. Like it just already felt good to me. And I think it's interesting how like I've never thought about this before, but I definitely knew that like she was supposed to see me do some really good stuff. And so I think she's seeing that now,
I
and
believe
that
that for
really
sure.
makes me like, it makes me even more proud of myself for what I'm doing
All
and
right.
how I got here. So
I love that, and
thank
it's
you.
fun to watch you think. You were really digging deep there, and, I have one more question, and then I'll let us wrap up. I have to have you on again. This is so fun.
Please, I'm happy to
Well,
come on as often as you'll have me. I loved it.
so what advice do you have to help others find it?
I believe that you have to be willing to make other people uncomfortable, and to be able to quiet the noise around you enough that you can go within and not be afraid of what you find there.
Boom.
I'm going to
Wow.
leave it at that. I think that would.
Wow. That's powerful. That's very powerful. Wow, Kate. Feng Shui Kate. She's here to inspire. Woo! I'll tell you what, that's amazing. I love that. I have enjoyed this hour flew by. I have no
I know.
idea. Like I have 1,000 more feng shui questions. So we'll have to have you back on. But everybody, I invite you, if you're catching the tail end of this, watch the whole thing and check out our website. It's rolling along the bottom there. So enjoyed having you. And remember, everybody, come every Wednesday at 8 p.m. And next week we have another badass woman that's going to be on, Cosette Leary. And whoo, she has a story too. Kate, you ought to tune in and watch this.
Yeah, I'm excited.
So, and Sean Benson says,
Thank
"Kate,
you,
you're
Sean.
incredible." Yes, she is. So, much love to you. Don't leave. Okay. We're
Okay.
gonna go to the outro. We'll talk in the green room with mints and champs. Anyway, see y'all again next week. Thanks for joining us. Have a great
Thank
night,
you.
y'all.
Yeah. Have a good night.